This is Marketing Uncomplicated. All right. Welcome back, everybody. I have Nikita Vakshruv. I should have asked you, how do I pronounce your last name?
It's
Vakshruv
Vakrushev.
Vakrushev.
There you
Vakrushev. Okay, perfect.
go.
Vakrushev. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I have Nikita Vakrushev, who is the CEO and founder of Aspect. That's spelled Aspect with a K, so Aspekt. And we'll get into what and why he named the company that. It's an e-commerce retention agency specializing in email and SMS marketing. And we all know email is the cheapest form of marketing, and we'll dive into the nuances and the great things about SMS marketing. Welcome to the show, Nikita. How are you?
I'm I'm doing great. Thanks again for having me. I'm looking forward to diving into all things business wise, email wise, and everything in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with, when did you start Aspect and why?
Well, I started Aspect. Well, there's actually a lot of layers to that question. So Aspect is like an evolution from my previous agency, which was called RPM Media Inc. And that was an evolution from me doing print on demand drop shipping as like my first business in 2017. And then slowly learning the ropes of all things marketing, whether it's Google ads, Facebook ads, email, conversion rate optimization. Back in the day when you can just put out an ad and actually get purchases right away, it's a little bit different now.
Yeah.
But
Before
yeah,
you dive in, I just want to talk a little bit about that print on demand drop
yeah,
shipping so that the audience understand like where we were and where we're going.
yeah, of course. So with print on demand, it's basically drop shipping, but for clothing and anything that's textiles. It was like a Reddit post I read during like the summer or the winter of 2016, where you could simply set up designs and someone will automatically fulfill it for you and send it out on your behalf. And all I had to do is just upload designs and market my business. And I used to sell t-shirts back in high school and I knew Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator very well. So I'm like, this is a no-brainer. And started that shop. Eventually it grew to, I think, like at the time it was a lot of money for me. It was like 5,000 a month.
Yep.
But, me being a college kid, not knowing much, where it's like, okay, 5K, that's a lot of money. But that taught me the basics of the everything in the marketing space, like the Facebook, Google, email, etc.
Yep.
And eventually I had friends reaching out to me of like, hey, how do I set up a Shopify store? Or how do I set up my Pixel? And I would help them out here and there. And eventually someone asked me like, hey, can you do this for me? I'll pay you. And I'm like, oh, people can get paid for this. And that naturally evolved into the first agency, which was RPM Media. And we did all things for any niche. I didn't know what niching down was at the point. And we did Facebook ads, we did website builds, we did SEO, and we did all of that. And eventually in 2020, when COVID happened and things started to shut down, people became more reliant on online businesses. I'm like, well, it's a no brainer to switch into being an e-commerce provider since a lot of the world is going into e-com. And that's when it's like, okay, it doesn't make sense to have this old brand because people associate with me doing everything. So let me rebrand into Aspect and specifically hyper focus on just Facebook, Google, email, and all things marketing, but solely on e-commerce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, 2 years later, 1 year later, we switched into just doing email and SMS marketing.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about from RPM Media to Aspect, where you basically, I forget the term that you use, but it was like niching down, I think you
Yeah.
said. So it's really understanding that the more isn't merrier. So it's really hyper focusing on one thing that can exponentially grow your business, because then you really target this one kind of sector. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that also can pertain to somebody who is launching a product or a service, and out
Hmm.
the gate doing one product or service is really exponentially like helpful and supportive for growth, and then adding on to that once you have brand affinity and market and product market fit and so on and so forth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it simply came down to a few things. And yeah, I didn't know what niching down was. I'm like, I need money. I'll take any client I can get. And I did service the clients, but I knew down deep that like it wasn't probably the best service that they could have bought. Maybe it was like the cheapest, but they could have gone and paid a little bit more and gotten something better. So it was that the world shutting down, and also at that point, a lot of my clients were e-commerce business based. So it's like, okay, I'm learning so much about e-commerce, how the pixel works, how to get the right creatives out, how to launch Facebook ads, what kind of funnels I need to use. And I'd have like local business come to me, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, I can help you out. And then I had like a couple failures there where, some of the marketing campaigns didn't work out. And it's like, wow, okay, I guess the discrepancy between ecom and local is pretty big. So since 60% of my clients are on ecom, let me just focus on that, ride with the local clients that I have, and slowly as they churn out, I'll just not renew those contracts.
Yeah.
And that's where that pivot came into. And going into ecom, definitely a breath of fresh air, because it's like, okay, cool, I'm only focusing on this. And then eventually niching down even further into email and SMS, it came down to just me and my team. We got burnt out trying to manage 5 different services for all of our clients, and it was just so overwhelming. We got burnt out, and it's like, okay, we need to change something up. And we pivoted into email and SMS from like that burnout stage.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So just like in marketing, there's a customer journey, there's also a business journey in business. So as my question in the end is why email and SMS? So walk me along the path of your service offerings. And obviously you talked about, getting burned out because you're offering multiple services, but
Hmm.
in the sense you obviously realized that there was more demand for potentially email and SMS, which is maybe why you went in this direction. But I want to hear a little bit about that business journey in terms of your offerings.
Yeah, so you're correct in that sense where there was a big gap on the email and SMS side. I'm sure there was email agencies out there that started way back before I even pivoted, but again, there was not that much of a market demand for it. And if you really think about it, like in 2021, no one really, like, people knew about Klaviyo, but they didn't know how powerful it could be or how much of a good channel it is until, now 2024, everyone's like, I need an email agency, or I need some sort of email in-house person.
Yeah.
But yeah, it came down to a gap in the market. Looking at the financial side of things, I looked through it and I saw that even though clients were signing on and staying on, most of them that stayed on for the longest had email as a service complimentary. So really good retention on our end for keeping clients on. It had the best results. Like, I think we knocked it out of the park for pretty much every single client that signed on for email and SMS. And at the same time, we had really good designers on hand. So I didn't want to let go of those designers because they're really talented. And I know that if we switch to email and we start to teach them how to do great emails, they would knock it out of the park in the future. So all of those things combined, it was pretty much a no-brainer, especially when we signed on Facebook ad clients, we'd have like a 6 out of 10 winning average where, 6 clients sign on, we have a great service, and they like the results. We're pushing the boundaries there, but those 4 really hurt the confidence. Even with me selling, it was hard to sell when it's like, okay, there's almost a half and half chance where this client might not work with us after the initial like 1 to 2 months.
Yeah, totally. I think that completely makes sense. I mean, and obviously I like what you also say in the aspect of there could have been other agencies out there offering, and there's always going to be competition, but it's like, how do you set yourself apart from other folks? And so talk to me a little bit about your market stack against competitors at that time. And I think you kind of alluded to it when you said, people obviously knew about Klaviyo, but they didn't know how powerful it could be. And guess what? A lot of clients who sign on to all of these marketing tools and platforms don't utilize it to its fully function, and they're paying for it. So,
Yeah, that's the thing. I think those were the 2 main selling points of, like, number one, they don't know how to use it properly, or maybe they're not getting a good enough juice worth the squeeze out of the email platform that they're using. And number two, since transitioning from being a full stack agency into email, a lot of email agencies at the time, they were solely email. They never touched ads, or they never touched CRO or SEO or any of these other marketing channels. So coming in from a background of like, hey, we used to be full stack and now we're only email. So we fully understand the customer conversion cycle from seeing the first impression all the way to going across the finish line and buying. So that sort of edge really helped us out in the beginning, and sign our first couple of clients, because they're running ads, but they are like, okay, we don't want an email agency that just designs emails. We want them to think about how to attract the customer, how to convince the customer about the product, how to teach them how to use the product, that sort of thing, and all of it just baked into getting the customer to convert, and how to utilize all those other channels with email as well.
yeah, totally. Now, obviously, you went from RPM to building Aspect, but tell me a little bit more in terms of how you started to begin to find your clients as you transitioned into Aspect and boiling down to just email marketing and tech and SMS messaging.
Yeah. So way back, like in RPM Media days, like it was just cold emailing and referrals and Facebook groups. A lot of people like myself and like other marketing nerds, they lived in Facebook groups where they communicated. So like that was a good source of clients. Cold email at the time wasn't being overrun by everyone in the cold email space where,
Yeah.
we promise you 100 book leads for or else you don't pay. So there was no competition on the cold email side, and I was lucky to be able to capitalize on that. But in the transition to Aspect, we started to see more consistent channels like Upwork being a really good way to get clients. And people think of Upwork as like the ugly stepchild, where like, oh, you're only getting cheap clients, or you're dealing with a bunch of other competitors from the Philippines and India, where they're going to outbid you and offer cheaper prices, but that's further from the truth. We actually still get our leads from Upwork, and we've been able to close a lot of contracts this year that led to a lot of revenue because of that platform. And being
Yeah.
able to double down during COVID, especially in 2020, I did nothing but work. You couldn't really do anything socially, so I'm like, all right, let me just lock in for the year, and I would submit anywhere between like 6 to 10 different Upwork proposals a day for every single job that I could. And that led me to like a huge exponential growth to be able to then afford a team, as well as get more consistent clients that way.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you reference Upwork as the ugly stepchild, because I think what a lot of people think of it as is like, oh, I'm just gonna log on to Upwork and I'm gonna find somebody that is gonna do the job for me that's 15, $20 an hour or like whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
But then there are the folks that are in there that are based in the US that are a little bit more expensive, but then you know that there is a particular baseline in terms of experience, especially in the US market, because I'm not saying that people overseas can't do the job and do it amazingly and potentially maybe even better, but I think
Hmm.
it's just at what how quick and how fast you need it. And sometimes it is that aspect of knowing like you might be working with somebody that can turn it around pretty quick. So my point in that is that don't push away platforms that you have a notion that you think about it in one sense, because sometimes the marketing of those platforms or your experience of those platforms could have skewed you in one manner versus the other. So it's always be open, I think, to other things. And I love that you bring that up because, there's a lot of people that are on Upwork and still on Upwork as independent contractors based in the US. And it's not just a global overseas, based in Pakistan, India, and so on. So,
Yeah, like 100% to your point. Like people don't understand that there's like Fortune 500 companies on this platform that
okay.
are looking for great talent, and
Yeah.
all you have to do is just show them the case studies, your experience. And my hourly rate at Upwork started at 20 bucks an hour. Now it's at 70 bucks an hour.
Yep.
Granted, I could probably push for higher, but that's where you start to meet that middle ground of like, okay, he's too expensive and people don't even look at your profile because they just see that $100 bill per hourly rate. And it's like,
Sure.
maybe he's too expensive, but like that 70 is still a sweet spot where I can still catch really good talent and maybe, convince them that the price that they're paying is worth the value that we're going to be providing for them as an agency.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing that up as well. That's another point because it can be translated onto anybody offering a different product or service. And how do you stack up against your competitors? And where do you kind of want to streamline into the sense of am I going to offer myself too high and outbid myself? Or and this could be outbidding yourself if you're even selling swimsuits or a soft drink or whatever it is. Or am I
Hmm.
going to kind of fall in line with that sweet spot where it's like, okay, maybe they'll pay a little bit more, but they won't necessarily feel it, but they will actually get a better service or a better product.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you kind of have that sweet spot of 70 bucks an hour. 60 to 70 is like a nice sweet spot where you can still capture small businesses that want a really premium service, or medium sized business that just want to outsource their work and are okay with paying a little bit extra more for getting that done.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been great so far. So I want to dig in a little bit more into the service that you do offer from email and SMS. Let's talk about how the two can complement. Let's talk about how they can support each other separately, and what types of businesses can either go in and do both, or what type of businesses start off with one or the other, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, on the email and SMS side, we typically handle the entire lot for the client. So that means the copy, the design, the setup, the strategy, the testing, deliverability, all of it, like pretty much everything that goes into retention, we can handle fully for them. As far as where to start, I always recommend just starting with email. That's the baseline. Everyone has an email address at this point. I think more people have an email address than they do have running water. So it's a good place to start. And SMS
Running
is a good
water.
place to start once you have a pretty good database to work off of. So, for example, what we always recommend people doing is, or our clients to do, is if they don't want to start SMS right away, what they can do is just start capturing SMS numbers so that way they have at least some sort of a database to send out to, and then work more on a regular cadence with sending SMS messages.
Hmm.
And SMS typically works best for lower average order value products. So if your AOV is anywhere below $150 to $200, you can make a quick impulse purchase if it's below that. Anything above that, we've noticed that SMS is more of a, how would I put it? It's more of a retention channel, or like a nurture channel. People
Sure.
aren't really going to make snap decisions on like a $500 kayak. Whereas if you send like a lip gloss kit for like $40, they can purchase right off the SMS.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and that's where I think, Instagram purchasing has become, super popular because of all of that, in terms of like click purchase off of your, Apple Wallet and so on and so forth. So yes, the lower ticket prices, or the average order, you said AO, average order
Value.
value. Um, just wanted to clarify that for the audience. Yeah, it's much more of a less decision making, quick snap. It's almost like taking QVC onto your phone, right?
Yep.
in terms of a text message versus calling in and saying, I want that product. Not that I bought anything from QVC, but yes. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more in terms of, platforms, systems, because I think that this is very important. I mean, we obviously know Klaviyo dedicated to e-commerce, right?
Hmm.
There's other platforms out there that, can support different things that are needed, but from a wide array. How does somebody decide what email service platform do I jump into? What is a good number to kind of, have demos with, and then boil down to what are the how would you set up like a pros and cons list that is applicable to any industry?
Yeah, great question. I'd say anything regarding ecom, SaaS, online sales, I would recommend just going with Klaviyo because they have so many integrations at this point. Like we've set up emails for like yoga studios in the past through Klaviyo, and it works perfectly fine. Uh, when it comes down to more physical businesses or more B2B, I would recommend Active Campaign. They again, I think they've been around for 24 years now, so they've been since pre-internet almost. They have a great solution. Again, a lot of integrations, and we use them for all of our email sending on the business side. Uh, Very easy to set up automation, set up campaigns, and it's pretty plug and play. Outside of that, if you want to go even deeper on the ecom side, I know SendLane is another good option there. I try to avoid from MailChimp. It's a very easy and cheap, not easy, cheap, but like it's a low cost, very easy, very dumbed down version of what you can do with email. But if you're trying to take more advantage of it and try to have more custom automations, that's where like Klaviyo and Active Campaign can really do the trick. I guess like a good example would be like Squarespace is like the MailChimp to where WordPress or like Webflow is to like Klaviyo and an Active Campaign.
Totally love that you brought that up because, in just working with, in the past with some clients who have set up their websites on Wix and now they're growing.
Yep.
It is how should we remind me in terms of how we present it, but it's like the customer facing, that's the word I'm looking for. Customer
Hmm.
facing marketing is we do it for you back end, so on and so forth. You don't need to worry about it, all this good stuff. But then they're growing and then they work with a consultant, or they work with an agency and they're like, upgrade my website. And then all of a sudden for like engineers, Wix is an absolute nightmare, right? They don't
Yeah.
make it easy at all. Versus like when a WordPress looks like, a dinosaur interface and isn't as sexy as Wix, it is so much easier to create updates to your website, transferring domains from like one website to another and so on and so forth. So perfect example.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, it may be a dinosaur. Like I've used WordPress all my life. I know there's like Webflow out there, which is like an iteration of WordPress, and I hear a lot of good things about it. I'm just too old to learn that platform at this point.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, there's so many more features on softwares like Klaviyo and ActiveCampaign that allow us to have custom automations that can push the boundaries on the email revenue side that isn't possible on Mailchimp. And we've seen the results behind it because we've worked with clients for a couple months on Mailchimp, and it's like, yeah, it's going great, like we're making money. And then once we switch over to Klaviyo, it's like an immediate like difference in revenue, and it's like, oh wow, we're actually making real money, like a real revenue channel from Klaviyo or from ActiveCampaign.
yeah, totally. And so talk to us a little bit about the differentiation for clients from setting up like automations versus doing things like manually, right? I mean, obviously you
Hmm.
want your life to be running on autopilot, but then there are certain things that need to be run from a manual standpoint. But I mean, talk to us a little bit about those build outs for your clients.
Yeah, so when we handle emails for our clients, it usually drops into two buckets. We have campaigns and we have automations or flows in Klaviyo as example. Campaigns are basically one-time sends, and that's where you send out any promotions, any info about your product, any customer highlights or testimonial highlights, basically one-time sends to your entire list. Automations, on the other hand, are built there specifically to handle most of the automatic back and forth that you would have with a client, basically set up on autopilot. So once you have it set up, you don't really have to worry about it. There is some A/B testing that I recommend doing once you set it up to make sure it's performing to its peak. But for the most part, there's a lot of automations that take care of basic communication. Like the welcome automation takes care of customer nurture. So taking a person that's visiting the website, teaching them about the business, teaching them about the brand, so that way they turn into a customer. You have abandoned checkout, which recovers people that were on checkout, but something came up, they didn't finish the purchase, so it follows up with them every couple of days to make sure that they complete the purchase. Same thing with abandoned cart. If they added to cart but didn't purchase, we follow up. We have abandoned browse, so if people visit a specific product page, we follow up with them. And abandoned site, which is any general content that they have on their website. If they go through a blog or if they go through the homepage, we follow up with them if we have their email to see like, hey, is there something that we missed, or is there something that you checked out that you liked? Very general messaging. Then we have like post purchase. So after someone purchases, we'll follow up with them saying like, hey, thank you for your purchase. Maybe offer some tutorials on how to use the product, and then ask for a review at the end. If you were to do this all manually, you'd have to have a whole separate employee to be physically sending out all these emails. But
Sure.
all these modern platforms make it really easy to just automate all this messaging based off of the triggers that a customer makes already.
Yeah, totally. Now, there is obviously the age-old saying that everybody talks about, specifically like, us marketers, but we talk about your owned land versus your rented land, right?
Hmm.
Owned land is the most valuable that you have as a business owner, which means your email system and all the emails that you have in your system, versus the rented land, which are your followers on your social media channels, your yeah, like LinkedIn, Instagram, so on and so forth. So talk to us a little bit about migrating data off of those platforms onto your email system to ensure that, because sometimes your social channels may exponentially grow a lot faster than your email might. And so I think we just need to keep reminding small business owners that they need to be collecting emails from folks as they're continuing to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the point that you brought up with rented and owned land, because that's exactly what email is. It's your own first party data that you have. And that's I didn't bring that up, but you reminded me of it. That's also another reason why we switched into email, because we've been hit with so many different algorithm changes when we were doing ads, where our ad accounts got shut down and we had to talk to someone about getting them reinstated. And we were just tired of dealing with that hassle of having something that's completely out of control, are out of our control. Granted, email still has its own little tidbits of things that are out of our control, but for the most part, it's a channel that you own, and all you have to do is just pay for the monthly software to send out your emails, and you're pretty much good to go. And maybe
Yeah.
ourselves like an agency, but the email collection part is the most important part. And while you do collect emails through orders, the best way that we've seen collecting emails outside of orders is through a pop-up, some sort of opt-in form, maybe some opt-in ebook on your blog page, or even through lead gen ads on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for an upcoming release, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that sort of thing. We've seen it work really well with converting people that are on Facebook traffic into actual subscribers that we can then send out automation emails and then campaign emails.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that that's just so important, and a lot of people tend to forget about it. I mean, there's so many people who have been in business for so long, and they have all of their data not in their system
Yep.
whatsoever. And there's also the age old saying of like email is the cheapest form of marketing, right? And it's
Yep.
going to be your most lucrative. So it's like you're going to grow your system. You have an affinity, you have a trust, you have something that you want to sell, you want to push. Same thing with SMS. You can push it. It's people who already know you. And so it just supports the sales a lot faster and quicker in that aspect.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I said aspect, but I wanted to ask you
It's right there, so it's
yeah,
easy.
what is the reasoning behind the name of the company?
To be honest with you, there really is no in-depth reason behind it. I remember when I was trying to come up with a company name with my roommate, and we just sat down for like an hour and a half or 2 hours just brainstorming different names. And it just came down to like, I want it to be a single word, I want the domain to be available, and I want it to be misspelled a little bit. So I know there's like a whole modern like SaaS scene where everyone misspells their names and it looks weird, but it sounds like a normal word. So I'm like, okay, cool. Aspect sounds like a like really good name. Let me see if it's available with a K. Turns out it wasn't like as just the normal domain. So I'm like, okay, aspectagency.com. All right, that's available. I immediately bought it, and then I immediately ordered someone on Upwork to make a logo for me, and then they came up with this. And then the next week I had a website up. So I didn't want to get bogged down into spending weeks and weeks of trying to think of a very thoughtful name. It was just
Yeah.
like, I need something that I can run with and just rebrand right away.
Yeah, and that's always, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either, because I think that in the end, sometimes when it becomes that simple, well, it's also like how I like to say, don't focus on things that don't generate ROI.
Exactly.
Focus on things that are going to get you to start generating ROI and just keep pushing forward, right?
Yeah.
So it's like obviously you don't want to have a ridiculous name, but you want to have something that rings and that kind of resonates. And in a way, I mean, when you think of the word aspect, you don't necessarily think of email and SMS, but that's okay. I mean, a lot of names out there aren't connected to their offering. So I think keynote here is to not get bogged down, not to focus too much time on it. It's not what's going to generate revenue for you. You'll be able to explain that in whatever else you do in marketing thereafter.
Yeah, I think thinking back to it, I think I had a couple like ad related like names on that like checklist, and I like my roommate brought up a good point. It's like, hey, what if you pivot? And it's like, yeah, you're completely correct, and I can still use the name if I pivot. And lo and behold, like a year later, I ended up pivoting, and we still stuck with the same name.
That's great. I think it's good. I think it's good to stay with the same name because you've created some kind of affinity with some folks, and I think, if unless there's a complete reasoning behind changing the name, I think upgrading on logos versus the name, as we've seen with some of the bigger box brands anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your growth now. So, I mean, prior to us jumping on, we talked a little bit about how you were noticing, okay, we actually need to start hiring. At what
Yep.
point do you start to realize, you know, growth, right? I mean, where are you seeing that in what's happening, and how do you guys decide as a company, okay, this is the next step?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to like bottlenecks, and that's usually a really good sign of like, okay, we're starting to run into issues with maybe projects taking a little longer than they should, or maybe some of our employees are at capacity. And that's what we realized over the last 2 weeks is like sometimes like we're currently reaching capacity with everyone. And if I get a gut feeling where I'm unconfident in selling someone because I think we can't fulfill for them correctly, then it's like, okay, then maybe something's up. And then that caused me to look through our numbers, look through our clientele, go through our roster, and see how each of our employees, like how much workload they have basically. And I spent the entire morning doing all that digging, and I came to a realization like, okay, all of our employees are pretty much almost at capacity. And I don't want to hit full capacity because then at that point, there's really no flexibility. So I have to go and start, putting up job posts and all that next week and start looking for another person to help with fulfillment.
Yeah, no, that's great. Congratulations. So, Nikita, I want you to give the audience three things that they can take away from this conversation in terms of what they need to be thinking about if they haven't started email or SMS, or if they have, and ways to optimize email and SMS.
Yeah, first and foremost, if you haven't set up email marketing at all, I would recommend doing it as soon as possible. Have some sort of opt in or pop up set up on your website so that way you're capturing email addresses. And the thing is, you don't have to start the list from zero. Your best friends, your family, anyone that you've ever came in contact with, you can literally just, I think there's a tool out there where you can scrape everyone that you've ever communicated through Gmail or Yahoo, and then it'll spit out all of the emails that you've talked with, and those could be the first couple, like 50 or 100 people that are on your email list that you can start sending to.
Yeah.
That's for people that haven't started. For people that have started, I would recommend looking into the pop-up that you have set up. I don't want to keep it all opt-in based, but usually if people don't have a really good opt-in, it's because, or they don't have a big list, it's because they don't have a good opt-in. So if you can optimize that, that will get a lot more people through your automations, and it will have a lot more impressions on them, which will lead to more revenue. And looking into automations as well, if you're able to ever look like audit or see if there's a way to optimize those or do any A/B tests, that has also brought in a lot of revenue for our clients, and I'd recommend doing that as well.
Yeah, that is a good point that you brought up, and we haven't talked about that actually. A/B testing on steroids, both creative and content and subject lines. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the main A/B test that we try to handle is subject lines, like you mentioned, sending times, as well as the different call to actions that we use, and any different elements. So the elements could be the headline is above the image, or the headline's below the image, or the button color's red, or it's green. Those basic elements help a lot with click through rate. Subject line helps with open rate, and everything in between just helps with getting more revenue. Like,
Hmm.
for example, send times, you'd be surprised where, like Klaviyo has this function called smart send time, and you can set it up and it'll do different sends to different pockets of audiences to see what the best open rate time is. And I think it takes anywhere between like 8 to 10 emails before it gets a conclusive number. And for brands that we used to send out in the early morning or in the afternoon emails, most of their engaged audience is at like, I think like 12 a.m. or like 1 a.m. And it's like, is this correct? And then
Yeah.
we're like, okay, cool, let's try it out. We send out an email at 1 a.m. or schedule it at 1 a.m. And it's like our best performing email. It's like, well, okay, cool. I guess that that makes sense.
Yeah,
So those little tidbit, like those little tests, just at like you'd be like, there's no way someone's doing this, and lo and behold, you
they
get
are.
proven wrong.
Yeah. I guess it's those late night crawlers that are like tossing and turning, and they're like, oh,
Yep.
let me just check my email one last time.
Yep. Yep.
um, I also want to ask you one last question.
Hmm.
How is AI playing a role for you guys as a business? And I'm sure you get asked this a lot when you're working with clients. Like, are you going to set it all up for me with AI? Or like, how are you going to incorporate AI? And like, I'm sure they're like hounding AI, or maybe they're not, but tell me the pros and cons for, email and SMS as it relates to AI.
Yeah, great question. I don't think AI is still there yet where you can tell it, like, here's the product description, write out an email for me about the product launch. We've tried multiple times, like, and I've bought, I think, thousands of dollars of different AI tools to help with copywriting, and there's still nothing on the market yet that can fully get to that point. Maybe I'm just using the wrong prompts. But AI has definitely helped us on the ideation side. So every new month, if a client's using us for campaigns, we always have to come up with new ideas. So it helps speed up the ideation process from manually thinking about it or doing research to like submitting information about the brand, and it gives us ideas, and that kind of starts turning the wheels in our head of like, oh, what if we replace this with this, and that sort of thing. So it's helped out with ideation. It's helped with grammar checks and spell checking. We do have our own like spell checks that we use, but it's just another way of like, oh, this the way that it rewrote it made it sound a lot smoother, so we'll go with that. We haven't had to use AI from like 0 to 100 as far as like fully like copy pasting, but we take some tidbits from it. On the imagery side, we do use Midjourney here and there for backdrop images or
Hmm.
for like flat lays. For it's mostly backdrops. Like we haven't had to use AI imagery for product shots because it simply isn't there yet. But if we need like a wave pattern in the background or some sort of like technical pattern in the background, it's really useful for that.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I mean, there's other platforms that can help you, with product shots. You just upload the product shot and maybe it can help you give some backgrounds and stuff. I mean, there's
Yeah.
solutions for almost everything and not necessarily connected to AI, right? Um, Nikita, this has been great. The conversation has just continuously flowed and lots
Yeah.
of juicy information in here. What is your last statement, I guess, to the audience?
Um, email should be taken as seriously as any of the other channels. Like
If not the most serious.
yeah, you do own
Yeah.
the data, so 100%. I think a lot of brands focus too much on acquisition rather than retention,
Yeah.
and there's some brands that I'm in talks with right now that are in the 6, 7, 8 figure range where they simply don't have any revenue coming in from email, and it's not that hard to implement a right strategy. So I'd say take it seriously, and when you do take it seriously, you'll reap the fruits of your efforts.
Yeah. Be the gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Tell everybody where they can find you. Obviously LinkedIn, and then what the URL is to your business.
Yeah. So LinkedIn, Twitter are good places to just follow. YouTube, I post a video every week. So if you want to learn more about like how to set up a correct pop up or what flows to set up or what campaigns to set up, follow me on there. I have videos breaking everything down in depth. And if you want to work together, it's just my agency name, aspectagency.com, ASPEKT agency.com. And if you came from the podcast, we do offer free audits for those people. If not, it's $500 otherwise.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Nikita. And I will link all of those socials and emails below so you guys can get in contact. And we really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Likewise.